Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the main window. Each point of light reminded him of another world that had fallen to the Kethver Empire. The alien race had been conquering planets for over 100 years, and they seemed unstoppable. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, and their computers could predict every move the human forces made. The coalition of independent systems had formed 3 years ago when the remaining free worlds decided to fight together. But even working as one, they were losing badly. Jake's fleet had started with 200 ships. Now only 40 remained. The Kethver had over 300 vessels, all armed with technology that made human weapons look like toys from a museum. Jake was reading reports from the latest battle when his communication officer called out, "Captain, we're getting a strange message. It's coming from the Veltar." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. The Veltar were one of the oldest races in the galaxy. They had incredible mental powers and could read thoughts across vast distances. For the entire war, they had stayed neutral, watching but never helping either side. Jake had wondered if they even cared what happened to the rest of the galaxy. "Put it through," Jake ordered. The screen flickered, and a tall, pale figure appeared. The Veltar looked almost human, but their eyes glowed with a soft blue light, and their movements seemed to flow like water. This one spoke in perfect English, though Jake knew they could speak any language perfectly. "Captain Morrison, the Yin Pyo." Veltar said, "I am Zephyra, a scientist of my people. We have watched your war with great interest. We believe we can help you defeat the Kethver." Jake tried not to show his excitement. Any help from the Veltar would be incredible. "What kind of help?" "We have studied both human and Kethver minds for many years. We have discovered something remarkable about humans. Your thought patterns are completely unpredictable to Kethver battle computers. While they can guess what other races will do, they cannot understand how humans think." This was news to Jake. He had always thought humans were losing because they were too predictable. "How does that help us?" "We're still losing every battle." Zephyra's glowing eyes seemed to brighten. "Because you have been fighting them the way they expect. But if we place one human inside their command structure, that person could create chaos from within. One human, thinking in ways their computers cannot understand, could change everything." Jake felt a mix of hope and doubt. "You want us to send a spy into their fleet? That sounds impossible. How would we get someone inside?" "We have technology that can change a person's appearance completely. We can also implant false memories that will fool their questioning techniques. But we need the right person. Someone who thinks differently from other humans. Someone who breaks rules and makes choices that others would not make." Before Jake could answer, another voice spoke from behind him. "That sounds like a suicide mission." Jake turned to see Admiral Lisa Carter entering the bridge. She was the leader of all coalition forces, a tough woman who had fought the Kethver longer than anyone. Her hair was gray from the stress of command, and her eyes showed the pain of losing too many battles. "Admiral," Jake said, standing straighter, "the Veltar think they can help us win." Lisa walked to the screen and studied Zephyra carefully. "I've heard your people can see the future. If you can help us, why haven't you done it before?" "Because the time was not right," Zephyra replied calmly. "And because we needed to be certain about human nature. Now we are sure. Humans possess something unique in the galaxy. Your minds work in ways that cannot be predicted or copied by machines." Lisa crossed her arms. "Even if this plan works, how do we find the right person? Most of our people are well known to the enemy, and whoever we send might not come back alive." "The person we need is already in your forces," Zephyra said. "Someone who has been pushed aside because they think too differently. Someone who questions orders and makes unusual choices. Someone who other humans consider difficult to work with." Jake thought about this. He knew several officers who fit that description. Most of them had been demoted or sent unimportant jobs because they caused problems for their commanders. "We need time to think about this," Lisa said. "And we need to know more about your plan." "Time is something you do not have much of," Zephyra warned. "Our sources tell us the Kethvar are preparing for their final attack. They plan to destroy your remaining fleet in one massive battle. You have perhaps 2 weeks before they move." Lisa looked at Jake, then back at the screen. "If we agree to this, what exactly would this person have to do?" "They would pose as a Kethvar defector with important information about coalition weaknesses. Once inside their command structure, they would provide intelligence to you while subtly influencing Kethvar strategy. The goal is not just to spy, but to make their commanders make mistakes." Jake could see the appeal of the plan, but it seemed almost impossible. How would we communicate with this person once they're inside enemy territory? "We have developed a biological transmitter that can be implanted under the skin. It uses quantum entanglement to send messages instantly across any distance. The Kethvar do not have technology to detect it." Lisa was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Jake knew. She was weighing the risks against their desperate situation. They had tried everything else: direct attacks, guerrilla warfare, defensive strategies. Nothing worked against Kethvar superiority. Finally, Lisa spoke. "If we do this and it fails, we lose everything. But if we don't do anything, we lose everything anyway." She looked directly at Zephyra. "What do you get out of helping us?" "Survival," the Veltar said simply. "The Kethvar expansion threatens all life in this galaxy, even us." Jake found this surprising. He had always thought the Veltar were too powerful for anyone to threaten. "There are forces at work that you do not yet understand," Zephyra continued. "This war is part of something much larger. But first, the immediate threat must be dealt with." Lisa made her decision. "All right, we'll try your plan. But I want to choose the person myself." "That is acceptable. But choose quickly. We must begin the preparation process soon." After the communication ended, Jake and Lisa stood in silence for a while. The bridge crew continued their work, but Jake could tell they had been listening. News like this would spread quickly through the ship. "Do you really think this could work?" Jake asked. Lisa sighed. "I think we're desperate enough to try anything. The question is, who do we send on what might be a one-way mission?" Jake thought about the officers he had known over the years. Some were brilliant tacticians, others were brave fighters. But Zephyra had been specific about the kind of person they needed. Someone who thought differently. Someone who had been considered a problem by their superiors. "I might know someone," Jake said slowly, "but he's not going to like this idea." "Who?" "Ryan Brooks. He used to be one of our best tactical officers, but he was demoted after the Battle of Kepler Station. He questioned Admiral Harrison's strategy in the middle of the fight." Lisa nodded. "I remember that. Harrison wanted to court-martial him, but Brooks was right. If we had followed his suggestions, we might have won that battle instead of barely escaping." "Exactly. He's smart. He thinks outside normal patterns, and he's not afraid to break rules. Plus, he's been stuck on a supply depot for 6 months. He might be angry enough to take a crazy risk." Lisa looked out at the stars again. "Then let's go get him. Time is running out, and this might be our last chance to change the course of this war." As their ship turned toward the outer rim where Ryan Brooks waited, neither Jake nor Lisa knew that their decision would indeed change everything, not just the war, but the fate of the entire galaxy. Ryan Brooks sat in his small office at Supply Depot 7, staring at endless lists of ammunition counts and food rations. 6 months ago, he had been a lieutenant commander serving on the front lines. Now he was barely more than a warehouse. manager on a forgotten station at the edge of nowhere. The demotion still stung, but not as much as the knowledge that his ideas could have saved lives if anyone had listened. The Battle of Kepler station replayed in his mind almost every day. Admiral Harrison had ordered a direct frontal assault against the Kepler defensive line. Ryan had seen the trap immediately. The enemy was using their ships as bait to draw the coalition fleet into a killing zone. He had tried to warn Harrison through proper channels, but the admiral refused to listen. When the trap was sprung, Ryan had broken protocol and sent his tactical suggestions directly to other ship captains. His plan had worked. The ships that followed his advice survived the battle, but Admiral Harrison was furious about being disobeyed during combat. Ryan found himself facing a choice between court-martial and demotion. He chose demotion, thinking he could work his way back up. Instead, he found himself exiled to this supply depot, counting boxes while the war raged on without him. A soft chime from his computer interrupted his brooding. Someone was requesting permission to dock. Ryan checked the schedule. No supply. Ships were due for 3 days. He switched to the external cameras and saw a coalition cruiser approaching. It was much larger than the usual supply vessels, and it bore Admiral Carter's personal command codes. Ryan felt his stomach drop. Visits from high-ranking officers usually meant bad news. Maybe they were finally going to court-martial him after. Oh, or perhaps the depot was being closed, and he was being sent somewhere even worse, about 20 minutes later. Ryan stood at attention in the depot's small conference room as Captain Morrison and Commander Amy Rodriguez entered. He had served with both of them before his demotion. Morrison looked older, more tired than Ryan remembered. Rodriguez seemed nervous about something, which was unusual for her. "At ease, Brooks," Morrison said. "We need to talk." Ryan relaxed slightly, but remained standing. "Sir, if this is about the supply reports, I know I'm behind schedule, but—" "Not about supplies," Rodriguez interrupted. "We have a proposition for you, something that could get you back into the war." Ryan felt a spark of hope, followed immediately by suspicion. What kind of proposition? Morrison sat down and gestured for Ryan to do the same. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. If you're not interested, you can. Never speak of this conversation to anyone. I understand, sir. The Veltar have offered to help us defeat the Kethver. They have a plan that requires a very specific type of person. Someone who thinks differently from other humans. Someone who questions authority and makes unconventional choices." Ryan almost laughed. "You mean someone like me? Someone who got demoted for thinking differently?" "Exactly like you," Rodriguez said seriously. "Ryan, what you did at Kepler Station saved dozens of ships and thousands of lives. You were punished for it because Admiral Harrison couldn't admit he was wrong. But your ability to see patterns that others miss and make quick decisions under pressure is exactly what we need." Morrison leaned forward. "The mission is dangerous. Extremely dangerous. There's a good chance you won't come back alive. But if it works, it could change the course of the entire war." Ryan studied their faces. Both officers looked deadly serious, but there was something else there. Hope, maybe, or desperation. "What exactly would I have to do?" "The Veltar can change your appearance to look like a Kethver. They can implant false memories that will fool enemy interrogation. You would pose as a defector with valuable intelligence about coalition weaknesses. Once inside their command structure, you would feed information back to us while influencing their strategic decisions." Ryan sat back in his chair, stunned. "You want me to become a spy inside the enemy fleet? That's not dangerous. That's insane." "Yes, it is," Rodriguez agreed. "But Ryan, we're losing this war. We've lost 3 major battles in a row. Our fleet is down to 40 ships against their 300. If we don't try something desperate, We're all going to die anyway. Ryan thought about this. He had read the battle reports from his exile. On the depot, the situation was indeed hopeless using conventional tactics. The Kethver always seemed to know what the coalition would do before they did it. Their battle computers could predict human behavior with frightening accuracy. Why? Do the Veltar think this would work? Ryan asked. Morrison explained about human unpredictability and how Kethver computers couldn't understand human thought patterns. As he listened, Ryan began to see the logic behind the plan. If the enemy's greatest advantage was their ability to predict coalition moves, then putting an unpredictable human inside their decision-making process could indeed cause chaos. What happens if they catch me? Ryan asked. Then you die, Rodriguez said bluntly. Probably after they torture you for information. The Veltar say their memory implants should hold up under normal questioning. But if they get suspicious enough to use advanced techniques... She didn't need to finish. Ryan had heard stories about Kethvar interrogation methods. And if the plan works, then we might actually have a chance to win this war, Morrison said. Or at least survive long enough to find another solution. Ryan stood up and walked to the small window that looked out into space. In the distance, he could see the lights of other ships, supply vessels, a troll craft, the few remaining pieces of humanity's presence in this sector. All of it would be gone. If the Kethver won, he thought about his career, about the choices that had led him to this moment. He had always been willing to take risks when he believed they were necessary. At Kepler Station, he had risked his career to save lives. Now they were asking him to risk his life to save everyone. How long do I have to decide? Ryan asked. We need to know now, Rodriguez said. The Veltar are waiting on their ship. If you agree, the transformation process needs to start immediately. Ryan turned back to face them. What about my records? If I disappear, won't people ask questions? We'll say you were killed in a transport accident, Morrison explained. Your body was lost in space. It happens often enough during wartime that no one will investigate too closely. So he would be officially dead, with no chance of ever reclaiming his real identity. Even if the mission succeeded, Ryan Brooks would be gone forever. The man who came back, if anyone came back at all, would have to be someone else. There's something else you should know, Rodriguez said quietly. The reason we came to you specifically. At Kepler Station, you didn't just save lives by disobeying orders. You showed that you could think in ways that even other humans couldn't predict. Your tactical solution was so unusual that it took our own computers 3 hours to understand how it worked. Ryan remembered that battle differently. To him, the solution had seemed obvious once he saw the trap. But maybe that was the point. Maybe obvious to him was impossible for others. All right, Ryan said finally. I'll do it. Morrison and Rodriguez both looked relieved. Are you sure? Morrison asked. Once we start the process, there's no going back. Ryan thought about the supply lists on his desk, about the empty years stretching ahead if he stayed on the depot. Then he thought about the coalition fleet, outnumbered and outgunned, fighting a losing battle against an enemy that seemed to know their every move. I'm sure, he said. When do we begin? 2 hours later, Ryan stood in the medical bay of the Veltar ship. The alien technology around him looked more like art than machinery, flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Jafara stood beside him, explaining the transformation process in her calm, musical voice. The physical changes will be extensive, but reversible, she said. Your bone structure, skin color, and facial features will be altered to match Kethvar. Physiology. The process is painful, but not dangerous. Ryan nodded, trying not to think about how much it was going to hurt. The memory implantation is more complex, Zephyra continued. We must create a complete false history for your new identity. You will believe these memories are real while you are undercover. Only a specific trigger phrase will restore your true memories. What if I forget who I really am permanently? That is not possible with our technology. But the false memories must be completely convincing, which means they will feel absolutely real to you. You may find yourself confused about your true loyalties during the mission. Ryan took a deep breath. Let's get started. As the Veltar machines began their work, Ryan felt his old life slipping away. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks was about to die, at least officially. In his place would be born someone entirely new, someone who might just be able to change the course of an impossible war. Ryan floated in an escape pod, watching the massive Kethver warship grow larger through the small window. 3 days had passed since his transformation, and he barely recognized himself. His skin had turned the pale gray color of the Kethver. His features had been reshaped to match their angular bone structure, and his eyes now glowed with the same orange light as theirs. More disturbing were the false memories that felt completely real, memories of serving in the Kethver fleet, of growing disgusted with their brutal methods, of finally deciding to defect to the Coalition side. The Veltar had done their work perfectly. Even Ryan had trouble remembering which thoughts were truly his and which had been implanted. The only thing that felt completely real was his mission, to infiltrate the Kethvar command structure and create chaos from within. His escape pod was pulled into the landing bay of the warship, Dominion's Edge, the Kethvar fleet's command vessel. Ryan had programmed the pod's computer to make it look like he had barely escaped from a Coalition patrol. The story he would tell was simple. He was Kralthik, a mid-level Kethvar intelligence officer who had grown tired of the Empire's methods and wanted to help end the war quickly by sharing vital information about Coalition weaknesses. Kethvar soldiers surrounded him as he stepped out of the pod. They were tall and thin, with movements that seemed too precise to be natural. Their weapons were already pointed at him, but Ryan forced himself to remain calm. He had to play this perfectly from the very beginning. I am Kralthik of the Intelligence Division, he said in perfect Kethvar language, another gift from the Veltar transformation. I have important information for General Vexther about Coalition fleet movements. The lead soldier scanned him with a device that checked his biological markers. Ryan held his breath, hoping the Veltar modifications would pass inspection. After a tense moment, the device beeped green. You will come with us, the soldier said. General Vexther will decide if your information has value. They escorted Ryan through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. The Kethver ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than any Coalition vessel. Everything was made of smooth metal that reflected light in strange ways, and the air hummed with the power of engines that could push this massive ship faster than anything humans had ever built. General Vexther received him in a command center that looked more like a cathedral than a military facility. The general himself was impressive even by Kethvar standards, nearly 8 feet tall, with scars that marked him as a veteran of many battles. His orange eyes studied Ryan with an intelligence that made him very nervous. So, Vexther said, in a voice like grinding metal, another defector. Do you know how many Coalition spies have tried to infiltrate my ship? Ryan's heart pounded, but he forced his voice to remain steady. I am not Coalition, General. I am Kethvar, born on the world of Keth Prime. I served in Intelligence Division 7 for 12 years before I could no longer stomach our methods. Prove it. This was the moment Ryan had prepared for. The Veltar had loaded his mind with detailed knowledge of Kethvar military structure, including information that only a real intelligence officer would know. For the next hour, he answered Vexther's questions with perfect accuracy, describing classified operations, naming officers, and providing details that no human spy could possibly have learned. Finally, Vexter seemed satisfied. Your knowledge appears genuine. But why defect now? We are winning this war. Because winning is not enough for our leaders, Ryan replied, letting genuine frustration enter his voice. They want to exterminate every human in the galaxy. I joined the military to serve the Empire, not to commit genocide. This was a calculated risk. Ryan was gambling that some Kethvar might have doubts about their war aims. From Vexthera's expression, he had guessed correctly. What information do you offer? The general asked. Ryan began sharing intelligence about coalition fleet positions and planned operations. Most of it was accurate. The coalition had provided him with real information to make his story convincing. But he carefully mixed in small errors and suggestions that would benefit the coalition if the Kethvar acted on them. Over the following weeks, Ryan slowly gained Vexter's trust. His information proved valuable in several small engagements, though Ryan had made sure the coalition knew when to expect attacks. He was careful to build his reputation gradually, proving his worth without making himself seem too important too quickly. The hardest part was maintaining his false identity, while secretly gathering intelligence for the coalition. The Veltar biotransmitter implanted under his skin allowed him to send brief messages, but he had to be extremely careful about when and how he used it. Discovery would mean not just his death, but the failure of humanity's last hope. As Ryan learned more about the Kethvar fleet, he began to understand why they were so effective. Their ships were controlled by advanced computers that could calculate the probability of enemy actions with incredible accuracy. These machines had studied human behavior for decades, learning to predict coalition tactics with deadly precision. But Ryan also noticed something else. The Kethvar commanders relied so heavily on their computers that they had stopped thinking creatively. When he made suggestions that the computers hadn't considered, they were often surprised by how effective they were. His human way of thinking was indeed unpredictable to their artificial minds. One evening, while studying star charts in his assigned quarters, Ryan discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in the Kethvar military files was information about why they were really expanding across the galaxy. They weren't just conquerors seeking more territory. They were running from something. The files spoke of the Void Seekers, an ancient enemy from beyond the galaxy that consumed entire civilizations. According to the records, the Void Seekers had destroyed the Kethvar home world centuries ago. The Empire's expansion was not conquest, but evacuation. They were gathering resources and allies for a war that would determine the survival of all life in the galaxy. Ryan stared at the information, his mind racing. If this was true, then the war between humans and Kethvar was not just pointless. It was actively helping their real enemy. While the galaxy's two strongest military powers destroyed each other, the Void Seekers were moving closer. He had to get this information to the coalition, but it was too complex for the biotransmitter. Ryan would need to find another way to communicate, or risk everything by revealing his true identity to General Vexther. The decision was made for him the next morning. Vexther summoned him to the command center, where long-range sensors had detected something approaching from intergalactic space. Tell me, Crawlthick, the general said, his voice heavy with an emotion Ryan had never heard from a Kethvar before. Fear. What do you know about the Void Seekers? Ryan realized that his cover story might no longer be the most important deception he was maintaining. The real question was whether he could convince both sides to stop fighting each other before it was too late to fight their common enemy. I know they are why we are really here, Ryan said carefully. And I know that fighting the humans is exactly what the Void Seekers want us to do. Vexther turned to stare at him with those glowing orange eyes. You speak as if you have thought about this before. I have. It is why I truly defected, General. Not because I disapprove of genocide, but because I fear we are committing suicide. For a long moment, the command center was silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Finally, Vexter spoke again. "Show me what you mean." Ryan moved to the tactical display and began explaining what he had realized. The Kethver Empire and the Coalition were weakening each other with every battle. Meanwhile, the Void Seekers were moving steadily closer, timing their arrival for when both forces would be too exhausted to resist effectively. "The humans have something we need," Ryan continued, hoping he wasn't about to get himself killed. "They think in ways our computers cannot predict. That unpredictability might be the key to defeating an enemy that has never faced random, chaotic tactics." Vexter was quiet for a long time, studying the sensor readings that showed the approaching Void Seeker scouts. When he finally spoke, his words were barely above a whisper. "If you are right, then everything we have done has been wrong. We should have been preparing for this war, not starting a different one." Ryan felt a moment of hope, but it was quickly crushed by reality. Even if Vexter could be convinced, how could they possibly get the Coalition and the Kethver Empire to stop fighting and work together? Both sides had lost too much to forgive easily. "There might be a way," Ryan said, making a decision that would either save the galaxy or get him killed immediately. "But first, there is something you need to know about me." Ryan stood in General Vexter's private office, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not just his fate, but possibly the future of the entire galaxy. The Kethver general sat behind a desk made of some unknown metal that seemed to shift colors in the light, his orange eyes fixed on Ryan with an intensity that made him feel exposed. "You said there was something I needed to know about you," Vexter said quietly. "Speak." Ryan took a deep breath, knowing there was no going back. "My name is not Crawl Thick. I am Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks of the Coalition Forces. I am human." The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Vexter's expression didn't change, but Ryan could see his hand moving slowly toward the weapon at his side. Ryan remained perfectly still, betting his life on the hope that the general's desire to survive would outweigh his anger at being deceived. "You are a spy," Vexter said finally. "Yes, but not the kind you think. I was sent here to sabotage your operations, but what I found changed everything. The Void Seekers are real, and they are coming. If we keep fighting each other, we will all die." Vexter stood up slowly, his full height making him tower over Ryan. "Why should I believe anything you say? You have lied to me for weeks. Because I am telling you this now, when I could have kept the secret. Because the sensor readings confirm what your own files say about the Void Seekers. And because you know that my tactical suggestions have been more effective than anything your computers predicted." The general walked to a window that looked out into space, where distant stars twinkled against the endless black. "You claim to be human, yet you have provided accurate intelligence about Coalition movements. Are you betraying your own species?" "I gave you information they wanted you to have," Ryan admitted. "But I also learned things they needed to know. The question now is whether any of that matters compared to what's coming for all of us." Vexter turned back to face him. "Prove you are human." Ryan had prepared for this moment. He began speaking in English, describing details about human culture and history that no Kethvar could know. He talked about Earth, about the foods humans ate, about the music they loved. More importantly, he demonstrated the kind of random, intuitive thinking that had made his tactical suggestions so effective. "Human minds do not work like ours," Ryan explained. "We make connections that seem impossible to your computers. We see patterns in chaos, and we find solutions in places where logic says there should be none. That is why I could help you win battles, not because I had better information, but because I think differently." Vexter listened to all of this without interruption. When Ryan finished, the general sat back down and was quiet for several minutes. "Assuming you are telling the truth, Vexter said finally. "What do you propose we do? My empire and your coalition have been at war for 3 years. Millions have died on both sides. How do we simply stop fighting and become allies?" "We start with the truth," Ryan said. "Both sides need to know about the Void Seekers. They need to understand that this war is exactly what our real enemy wants. And you think your leaders will believe this? That they will trust the word of an enemy?" Ryan felt the weight of the challenge. Admiral Carter was tough and practical, but she was also suspicious and tired of losing. Convincing her to trust the Kethfer would be almost impossible. They might, if the message comes from the right source. If I can contact them and explain what I've learned here, they might listen. But it has to happen quickly. The Void Seeker scouts are already in our galaxy. Vexter activated a display showing the LATE sensor readings. Ryan could see 3 contacts moving at incredible speed toward the inner systems. They would reach Coalition and Kethfer territory within days. "There is another problem," Vexter said. "My superiors in the High Command do not know about my knowledge of the Void Seekers. This information is classified at the highest levels. If I suddenly propose an alliance with humans, they will assume I have been compromised." Ryan realized they were facing the same problem on both sides. Neither leadership would be willing to trust their enemies without proof, but the proof they needed might come too late to matter. "What if we could demonstrate that human-Kethfer cooperation actually works?" Ryan asked. "Show both sides that together we can do things neither could do alone?" "How?" Ryan thought about this for a moment, then pointed to the approaching void. "Seeker contacts. Those scouts are probably expecting to find us still fighting each other. What if they found something else instead?" Over the next hour, Ryan and Vexter developed a plan that was as dangerous as it was desperate. They would take a small combined force, Kethfer ships with human tactical guidance, and engage the Void Seeker scouts. If they could win a battle that neither side could win alone, it might convince both leaderships that cooperation was possible. The biggest challenge was getting Coalition ships to work with Kethfer forces without revealing the alliance beforehand. Ryan would have to contact Captain Morrison and somehow convince him to trust a plan that would sound completely insane. Using the Veltar biotransmitter, Ryan sent a coded message to the Coalition fleet. The message was brief but urgent. "Meet at Asteroid Field Gamma 7 in 18 hours. Come prepared for the impossible. Trust me." Meanwhile, Vexter began quietly assembling a small task force of his most trusted captains. He told them they were investigating the unknown contacts, but he didn't mention anything about working with humans. The next day, Ryan found himself on the bridge of a Kethfer destroyer, approaching the coordinates he had given Morrison. His heart pounded as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel and found themselves facing a Coalition cruiser and 2 escort ships. Both fleets immediately went to battle stations, weapons charging and shields activating. Ryan could hear the sea. Confusion in the voices of the Kethfer crew. They had expected to find empty space, not enemy ships. "General," the destroyer's captain said, "the humans appear to be here for a meeting. Should we attack?" Vexter looked at Ryan, who nodded. "Open a communication channel to the Coalition ships." On the main screen, Captain Morrison appeared, looking as confused as everyone else. Behind him, Ryan could see Commander Rodriguez and other officers he recognized. "General Vexter," Morrison said carefully, "I received a message from someone claiming to be Lieutenant Commander Brooks. Since Brooks is dead, I assume this is some kind of trap." Ryan stepped forward so Morrison could see him. Even with his altered appearance, he hoped his old friend would recognize something familiar. "Jake, it's really me. I know I look different, but it's Ryan. The Veltar changed my appearance so I could infiltrate the Kethvar fleet. I'm the one who sent the message." Morrison stared at him for a long moment. If you're really Ryan Brooks, tell me what you said to Admiral Harrison during your court-martial hearing. The battle raged for 3 hours, and when it finally ended, Ryan found himself staring at something that should have been impossible. The wreckage of 3 Void-Seeker ships drifted in space around his small combined fleet, while human and Kethvar vessels worked together to rescue survivors and repair damage. The strategy of combining computer logic with human randomness had worked better than Ryan had dared to hope. The Void Seekers had been programmed to fight predictable enemies, but they couldn't adapt to tactics that were simultaneously logical and chaotic. Every time their systems learned to counter the computer-generated strategies, human crews would make seemingly random modifications that threw off their calculations. Now, Ryan stood in the conference room aboard Vexter's flagship, watching as Admiral Carter and General Vexter faced each other across a table for the first time in 3 years of war. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut, but both leaders had agreed to this meeting after witnessing what their combined forces could accomplish. "This proves nothing," Admiral Carter said, though her voice lacked conviction. "One battle against an unknown enemy doesn't erase 3 years of war." "Perhaps not," Vexter replied calmly, "but it proves that together we achieved something neither could accomplish alone. And the enemy we face today is only the beginning." Ryan activated the holographic display showing intelligence gathered from the Void Seeker wreckage. The data was terrifying. Star charts showing the path of destruction across multiple galaxies, weapon specifications that dwarfed anything currently deployed, and worst of all, fleet sizes that numbered in the millions. "The ships we destroyed were scouts," Ryan explained. "According to their databanks, the main Void Seeker force will arrive in approximately 6 months. They have been monitoring our galaxy for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. And that moment is when the 2 strongest military powers have weakened each other through warfare," Vexter added. "They have done this before in other galaxies. They study civilizations, identify conflicts, and allow those conflicts to drain military resources before moving in to finish what remains." Admiral Carter studied the data with the expression of someone trying to accept an impossible reality. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Conservative estimates suggest over 2 million vessels," Ryan said, "each one more advanced than our best technology." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Captain Morrison, who had been quietly observing from the corner, finally spoke up. "Even if we stopped fighting today and combined our entire fleets, we would still be outnumbered by more than 1,000 to 1. How do we fight something like that?" Ryan had been thinking about this question for days, and he believed he had an answer. "We don't fight them the way they expect to be fought. The Void Seekers have conquered dozens of galaxies, but they've never faced anything like humanity." "What do you mean?" Carter asked. "Every civilization they've encountered has used logical, predictable strategies. They've learned to counter advanced technology, superior numbers, even exotic weapons. But they've never faced an enemy that combines advanced technology with completely unpredictable tactics." Vexter leaned forward. "You believe human unpredictability is the key?" "Not just unpredictability," Ryan clarified. "The combination of Kethver precision and human chaos. Your computers can calculate optimal strategies faster than any human mind, but they can't replicate the kind of intuitive leaps that humans make. If we can teach human crews to work with Kethver systems, and teach Kethver crews to think more like humans, we might create something the Void Seekers have never encountered." Admiral Carter looked skeptical. "You're talking about completely changing how both our militaries operate. That would take years, and you said we only have 6 months. "Which is why we need to start immediately," Ryan said, "and why we need to think bigger than just our 2 civilizations." Ryan activated another display, this one showing a map of the known galaxy. Red markers indicated Kethver territory, Blue showed coalition space, but there were dozens of other colors representing smaller civilizations scattered throughout the galaxy. The Veltar have been contacting other races, Ryan explained. Many of them have been watching our war with concern, afraid they would be conquered by whoever won. If we can convince them that cooperation is not just possible but necessary for survival, we might be able to build an alliance unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. A pan-galactic alliance, Morrison said slowly. Every civilization working together, with human tactical unpredictability at the center of it, Ryan added. Think about it. We could have Veltar psychic coordination, Cathver computational power, coalition adaptability, and the unique advantages of dozens of other species, all working together, using strategies that no computer could predict or counter. Vexthor was quiet for a long moment, then spoke with something that might have been respect. You think on a scale that impresses me, human. But even if such an alliance were possible, how would we coordinate the efforts of so many different species? Ryan smiled, finally reaching the heart of his plan. The same way we won the battle today. We let computers handle the logistics and coordination, but we have humans make the strategic decisions. Human intuition guided by alien expertise. Admiral Carter stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the mixed fleet of human and Cathver ships working together in space. This is insane, she said finally. 6 months ago, we were trying to kill each other. Now you want us to save the galaxy together. Yes, Ryan said simply. Because the alternative is extinction for everyone. Carter turned back to face the room. Even if I agree to this, and I'm not saying I am, how do we sell this to our respective governments? Both sides have lost too much to forgive easily. We start with the truth, Vexthor said. We show them the evidence of what is coming, and we demonstrate that cooperation works. The battle we just fought proves that human and Cathver forces can work together effectively. And, Ryan added, we make it clear that this isn't about forgiveness or friendship. This is about survival. Personal feelings don't matter when the entire galaxy is at stake. Over the next several hours, they worked out the details of what would become known as the Galactic Defense Alliance. It would be a massive undertaking, integrating military forces from dozens of species, developing new tactics that combine technology with unpredictability, and preparing for a war unlike anything anyone had ever imagined. Ryan found himself appointed as the first Director of Tactical Integration, a position that didn't exist in any military manual. His job would be to teach aliens how to think like humans while teaching humans how to work with alien technology. It was probably impossible, but then again, so had been winning a battle against the Void Seekers. 3 months later, Ryan stood on the bridge of the Unity, a ship that was itself, a symbol of the new alliance. Built using technology from a dozen different civilizations, crewed by beings from throughout the galaxy, and commanded using principles that no military academy had ever taught. It represented everything they were trying to achieve. Admiral Brooks, his communications officer, called out. The promotion had come with his new position, though Ryan still wasn't entirely comfortable with the title. We're receiving reports from the outer sensor stations. The Void Seeker main fleet has been detected approaching the galactic rim. Ryan looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the Galactic Defense Alliance fleet. Over 3,000 ships from 47 different civilizations, all working together using tactics that blended logic and intuition in ways that should have been impossible. Signal all fleet commanders, Ryan ordered. Tell them it's time to find out if one human really can change the outcome of a war. As the Alliance fleet moved to intercept the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced, Ryan thought about the journey that had brought him here. From a disgraced officer counting supplies on a forgotten depot to the leader of a galactic alliance. It was the kind of story that no one would believe if it hadn't actually happened. But then again, the entire War had been full of impossible things. Perhaps it was fitting that it would end with the most impossible thing of all: every civilization in the galaxy working together, guided by the chaotic brilliance of human intuition, to face an enemy that had never been defeated. The Void Seekers had destroyed dozens of galaxies, but they had never encountered anything like humanity. And as Ryan watched his impossible fleet move into position, he allowed himself to believe that sometimes, just sometimes, one human really could change everything. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and for the first time since this war started, Ryan actually believed they might win.